Well, welcome everyone. Welcome. Come and find your seat. We're going to get started here in just a second. My name is Jim Smither. I'm a professor in the Urban and Regional Studies and Planning program. We are here to hear a lecture from Zena Howard, and we'll do that in just a minute. But first we have some remarks, first from our program chair, Dr. Jimmy Chin, followed by an introduction by Wilder School, Dr. Susan Gooden. Jimmy, would you come up? Jimmy Chin, would you please come up?
Thank you so much, Professor Smithers, for good introductions. And good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, welcome to 2023 Gulak lectures. I would like to warmly welcome on behalf of my urban planning study programs, study planning programs. And I'm Dr. Chen, right now serving as program chair of Urban and Regional Study and Planning Program. We are so proud of to be part of the wider school, wider schools. And on these important occasions, I would like to thank many people. And first of all, I want to thank Gulak families, especially I'm so pleased to see Lauren Gulak, Misha Wolf, and the representative family to be here. I really appreciate Gulak family for support. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I also would like to thank the Dean's Office for your support and also for our communication event teams for your phenomenal jobs. Thank you so much. Thank you. I also would like to acknowledge my all faculty colleagues, especially Professor Jen Smither, for your excellent event organization. Thank you so much. Thank you. In this slide, I would like to briefly give a background introduction about the Gulak lectures. And the wider school brings leading experts, urban designers, architects, and all the local practitioners to this annual event to honor Professor Morton Gulak. And this Gulak lecture started in 2013, so this is the 10th year anniversary. So we have held so far seven years celebration except for pandemic years. And we honor the Professor Morton Gulak for his outstanding teaching and contribution to our programs. And he was one of the founding fathers of our programs. And he taught thousands of students urban planning, urban designs, and made a contribution to this program. We miss him sorely, dearly, So honor the Professor Gulak lectures. Next one, I want to briefly introduce our programs. Our MERPA program, Master of Urban Regional Planning programs, was established in 1973. So this year, we're going to celebrate 50 years anniversary of programs. And this program has been accredited by the Planning Accreditation Board since 1982. And most recently, we won 2 consecutive second-year accreditation. So we are very proud of our programs. And right now, the program, we have 11 dynamic faculty members, plus dozens of active adjunct faculty members. And our faculty members, they are conducting high-impact research in many areas, including the housings, racial equity analysis, sustainabilities, and environmental plannings, and geospatial analysis. And I'm so proud of my faculty colleagues. They have done phenomenal jobs in the teaching, research, and the service. And overall, my program is in great shape. We are thriving, and all of these accomplishments won't be possible without the collective efforts made by my faculty colleagues. I want to acknowledge my faculty colleagues, especially all the former program chairs, for their outstanding leadership of these programs. So these are all my faculty colleagues, 11 full-time faculty members. And some of our faculty colleagues, they are in Chicago to attend the SAP conference. They cannot be here. But some of our colleagues here, Professor Chen Smithers, and Professor Ivan Swines, Professor Niraj Vermas, and Professor Ben Teresa, they are all here. Thank you so much for coming to this event. Thank you. And in particular, I would like to acknowledge our four former program chairs to lead these programs, and Professor John Codino, and Professor Ivan Sun, and Professor Megan Goff, and Professor Damien Smith. I owe them thank you so much for your great leadership, okay, for this program. And also, another thing, I also want to pay tribute to Professor John Measures, who passed away last year. He was also one of the founding fathers of programs. He taught thousands of students and promoted racial equities and wrote several books and really fight for the social justice for these cities and beyond. And we also miss him so much. He passed away, unfortunately, last year, yeah, Professor John Measures. Now it's my great honor and privilege to introduce the Dean of Wilder School, Professor Susan Golden. Thank you so much, Professor Golden. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Chen, and welcome everyone. Welcome to our Gulak lecture. This is always a very, very exciting event for us in the Wilder School, and we are delighted that you are here with us this afternoon. It's great to see so many of our students, so many of our alumni, so many individuals from the community who come to pay tribute to Mort Gulak and to this enduring legacy that he and his family have bestowed upon the Wilder School. I know that Professor Chen acknowledged the Gulak family, but the one thing about the Gulak family that I want everyone to know is not only are they supportive of this series financially and in their engagement, but they support us with their presence. And so could the members of the Gulak family please stand, because we would like to recognize and thank you for all that you do and your continuous support of the Wilder School. I had the distinct pleasure of serving on the faculty with Mort Gulak when I first joined the Wilder School many years ago. This is now my 20th year at VCU. And one of the things that I think Jimmy did a great job of talking about Mort and all that he brought to the MERT program, but he brought a lot to the Wilder School and to the community and to our students as well. And as a colleague, his warmth and his compassion and his genuine care for the community really came through in everything that he did. Both Mort and Paula were pillars of this community, and we are just delighted to be able to celebrate their legacy and our legacy today through this lecture series. Mort also mentioned the rankings of the MERT program and many of the accolades of the MERT program and their credited status. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that so many of our graduates go on to get great jobs in planning, in the nonprofit sector, state and local government, and so the Wilder School and the MERT program in particularly is very well respected for the graduates we produce and for the work that they do to improve society day in and day out. We are proud that the Wilder School is ranked in the top 15% of all programs in public affairs nationally. And in many specialty areas, we are also ranked, including being ranked number 17 in urban policy in the nation, and number 1 in Virginia. So that is a direct reflection of the hard work and dedication of our colleagues in urban and regional planning, our students, our graduates, and our alumni. So please join me in giving them all a hand for the wonderful reputation of the program. I'd also like to share with you that we have many events that come up in the Wilder School, so I hope that you are receiving our communications. We have Wilder School in Action. We send that electronically. It goes out, so it's a lot of great ways to learn about events that are happening in the Wilder School. And I also would be remiss if I didn't tell you to save the date of January the 20th, 2024. We will convene in Washington, D.C. to do a national ovation to the namesake of our school, Governor Wilder, as we acknowledge and celebrate his 70-plus years of public service dating back to his service in the Korean War. So we are launching a scholarship fund associated with this historic effort, and we want to make sure that everyone marks the date of January 20th, 2024. Hope you're able to join us in Washington, D.C. And now, turning to the core of our evening today, which is to introduce this evening's guest speaker, Zena Howard. Zena Howard's career has been defined by visionary, complex, and culturally significant projects, like the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., and the Durham County Human Services Complex in Durham, North Carolina, that navigate social issues of dignity, equity, and justice in cultural and civic places. She has been recognized as a citizen architect for shaping architecture through remembrance design, a design process that responds to inequity and injustice by restoring lost cultural connections and honoring collective memory and history. Howard recognizes both the shared and individual sense of experience in the built environment, the emotional connection between people and spaces. This guides her work as Global Cultural and Civic Practice Chair and a body of work that unifies communities, strengthening public well-being and advancement. Curiosity and compassion also drive Howard's approach with her teams. She embraces cross-disciplinary collaboration with a broad range of specialists in urban design, art, history, anthropology, and public policy. As a founding member of the Perkins&Will Global Diversity and Inclusion Council, and through advocacy and mentoring, she advances diversity within the architecture profession. I also want to make sure that everyone knows that immediately following the lecture this evening, everyone is invited to a reception that will happen right around the corner in the Virginia rooms, just like the state. So in the Virginia rooms, where you'll have an opportunity to meet with our guest speaker and also to show your appreciation to the Gulak family. So thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us this evening, and I am delighted to welcome Zena Howard to the stage.
Thank you, Professor Gooden. And I want to say that, you know, I've read a lot about Mort Gulak, and you can certainly feel you understand his career, but you sort of feel the passion and empathy, I love that word, that he had for what he did. But it's certainly over the last half an hour been a pleasure meeting his family. And I suspect he might also have had a wicked sense of humor like some of his family members. So he surely is great to be honored here. And it's an honor for me to be able to speak in this lecture series today. And thank you for the introduction. So I want to talk a little bit about cultural expression in architecture. And I'll preface everything by saying we had a really good lunch earlier today just talking about the architecture profession and how it has sort of morphed and grown, transitioned over the last, I would say more so than I've been practicing for over 30 years now, but I would say even more so in the latter half of in the last 15 years, we've seen a lot of change. And what's changed for the better, I should say, and what's happened is a lot of focus on interdisciplinary ways of practicing. So I think you'll see me speak a little bit about what I've designed, what I've been a part of, the actual creation, but I urge you to really pay attention to how it was created, because it's really trying to look at a different practice model for us. Not different, but I would say an involved practice model for architects. So today I'm just going to kind of walk you through a few projects within the arc of my career, and you'll see how, for me, these projects have taken me from buildings that are more object. I consider them iconic catalyst because they do certain things in different ways in their own communities and in their own context. But this is also involved into public space, the outdoor space, the urban space, the heart of our cities, where in many ways our cities are a battleground for many things, including spaces, how we democratize public space, who gets a voice in public space, how we express certain things. So I think for me, it's been an evolution of my career that I hope I get to do for the next, 20 more years, or if I am old enough as Governor Wilder to be celebrating a 93rd birthday, hopefully more than that. So what is interesting about, more so than the buildings and the objects that are created, are the spaces in between and around these spaces. So leading up to thinking about how memory and remembrance and history informs architecture and the built expression, we just looked at, what happens around in between these spaces at critical points in our history, how people kind of flock to, whether it's the National Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta, I'll talk about that, or the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Some of the images shown here from the March for Our Lives rally, National Women's March, and so forth, show that these, it's not just the buildings, but it's the creation of place that is important. So the work, you heard Professor Gulak talk about remembrance design. So this new clarity about the purpose of culture led me to, and my firm actually, to a trademark practice that we call remembrance design. And essentially what that is, it's just an awareness, starts off being just an awareness that, you have to create and preserve identity somehow, some way, in community-oriented design, and that's key to great placemaking, particularly in our cities. It actually makes a project or a space more rich, compelling, relevant, and more rooted in its context. So what it really is, it's centered around not just what I said about the what, but also about the how and the who. And so it's really about using memory and using the memories of a community and the histories and the stories to build a more sustainable, forward-looking future in whatever we're going to design. People have to see themselves in it, and it has to feel culturally accessible to them. So it's really a way of engaging communities, co-partnering, co-design. We've had the word in our profession for the longest time called stakeholder engagement. And historically, that was something that I know when I was early in my career, I thought you just kind of did something and had a couple of public meetings, checked that box, and then moved on with whatever you were going to design anyway. But when you move beyond that superficial view and really co-partner, co-design with communities, you really come up with something more beautiful than an individual designer could have done alone, and something that the communities sustain and make even greater than what our original vision was. So I always like to talk about these 4 areas of a design approach to this type of design. It's about expanding collaborations and partnerships. It's wonderful to be here at a school of public policy because you'll see how, as an architect, early in my career, and certainly I never thought I would be collaborating with the type of people that I'm collaborating with today to realize significant change in communities and in cities. Every city has cultural assets that have to be leveraged should never be wiped out, should always be understood, and should always be honored. So taking the time to seek and search for that is important. Leading with culture, if we're going to realize inclusivity in urban areas that are rapidly changing, particularly those that are, and we know that they are, the change is driven by economic forces largely, but, and we can't always control that, but we can lead with culture and try to find ways to prevent the negative impacts of rapid growth, like cultural erasure, displacement, and the like. And finally, people always say, we have this word particularly in our studio, we talk about we want to do transformative design, and people always think that means that, you're designing the next building on the mall. Yeah, in some cases you are, but if that's your only definition of transformation, you've really missed it. So that's why I want to show you today how transformation occurs at a very small scale to a very large scale. So I love showing this early work, and I always do when I talk. So a little bit about me. I was a partner in a firm called the Freelon Group, and we were the second largest African-American owned firm in the country. It was headed by my mentor, friend, Phil Freelon, who passed away in 2019 as a result of the ALS disease, Lou Gehrig's disease. But prior to him passing away, we worked together for many years. And so when I started, I actually moved to North Carolina to work with the Freelon Group. And when we started, Phil Freelon had we were a smaller regional firm. We were just getting into doing more national work. And it was a huge opportunity, I thought, to expand what was begun there by Phil. And so the Harvey B. Gantt Center was one of those early projects, and like Mr. Wilder, most people know who Harvey Gantt is as well, particularly if you're in the Charlotte area in North Carolina. But the Gantt Center is a cultural center that's located right in the heart right now of Charlotte. Back then, in 2009, it was actually seen as the organization sought a site, they were sort of given remnant sites. And so this was seen as a remnant site, but it was really leveraged as a site with a lot of opportunity. And the reason why was because of the location. I think we were talking about how important location is earlier. And what was important here is to pause with these projects and take a step back and do the research about not just the context, meaning physical context and constraints, but really the history of the place. Every place has a memory, whether it's African American, whether it's indigenous, whether the land is acknowledged from someplace else, it has a history. So with this, we understood that deep history of African American entrepreneurship, strong, more so than, I was talking earlier about the Black Wall Street in North Carolina. There's an area in Durham where that was the center of Black economic growth in a time where, in the 60s, 70s, when it shouldn't have been. But this area in Charlotte, Brooklyn Village, certainly was that. Blacks owned their own businesses. In addition, they honored education, and there was an important high school here, and this Brooklyn Village High School that you see on the screen, and that edifice that you see is where every person that went to that high school, and usually in that community, stood and took their graduation photo, and they called it Jacob's Ladder. So the inspiration for all that was, Jacob's Ladder and this notion of weaving and quilting, and how weaving and quilting was not only just a beautiful tradition that came, in African American history, but it was also had a very practical purpose with the Underground Railroad to help people understand safe places and safe housing. So just combining those notions of the uplifting form of Jacob's ladder with the weaving and quilting was the genesis for the skin of that building. And that was really, really important to make a distinction in the city of Charlotte, where you have a lot of high-rises, glass towers, to really have this building be a counterpoint with that skin. So that's was one of the very early ways of thinking about how, if we had not really understood that Brooklyn community so well, by the way, that Brooklyn community was erased as part of urban renewal. So not really understanding that and actually infusing that into the design. The next project that we sort of looked at that time, so that was probably like 2009. Now we're coming up to 2014. And I would say this project, the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, we are currently doing the expansion for that. So stay tuned, the expansion will open in the next 3 years. But this is about inspiration to action and power. This center has established itself as one of the nation's leading centers for safe and welcoming dialogue around difficult topics such as race, gender, genocide, torture, and mass incarceration. So we, sorry, where are we going here? Here we go. So in thinking about this story, sometimes it's very difficult when you're telling a story. This is not a localized, the civil rights story is, but the human rights story is a worldwide story. It's hard to really understand where's your hook into this? Like how do you, beyond just designing something beautiful, how do you begin to understand the impact? So this notion about creating a space for action was inspired by how people mobilize for positive change. And you can see here, I mean, there are images from the Arab Spring and the civil rights marches in the United States, and really understanding the physical gestures people make and connections to each other. And I remember vividly when Phil Freelon kind of had that inspiration. And I think he was on a plane and he saw an article, a more recent article around people coming together. So this notion of hooking arms and two embracing forms that gently hold the content or the stories of this museum is really the genesis behind this form. But beyond that's how form, you think about how these stories and these sensitivities drive form. But there's also other things that we experience in physical space, and that's color and size. And so looking at how these two curving walls that define the building's exterior form, looking at how they are clad or skinned in architectural panels of varying sizes and earth tones, that was really, really important to us because that represents the different sizes and tones and skins and cultures that we all are from. So to celebrate this notion of civil rights and everybody joining together, regardless of their differences, towards one form of one accord was key. We talked about the National Museum of African American History and Culture. It opened in 2016, and so when we started this project, it was around 2000, and we started it actually in 2007 with pre-design. So we did 2 years of pre-design. I'm sorry, 2006. We did 2 years of pre-design before we started the design in 2008. And so this represents an even broader story, symbolic of really our common ideas and shared values. So understanding that this needs to this project needs to embody a quality of permanence. It needs to resonate and inspire, but it's not just one story, it's all of our stories. It's the African-American story through it's the American story through the African-American lens, as Dr. Lonnie Bunch used to always say. So I think everybody knows where this project is. It's in the shadow of the Washington Monument there. That was the original site. And this was tough for us because, you know, once you get over the excitement that, oh, you're going to design, you know, a building on this 360-degree site on the mall, you then the weightiness of what you put there comes to you, what you're trying to celebrate. And so part of the process here is that we did not have, like in some of the other 3 projects that I showed you, we had a stakeholder group. We had someone to engage. Here, you know, this is a story of a people centuries back. So how do you think about, you know, mining for stories? How do you think about making sure you're representing notions of celebration, you know, notions of you know, even resistance at times? How can you make sure that you're representing that? So the process for us starts with, this started with a charrette, which is a sort of design kind of think tank where we all come together, and we did this shortly after President Obama was inaugurated. And what resonated through all of that chatter, even at that point it was amongst the design group, because there's one distinction here. This project started as a design competition, and I'm going to show you another one that did as well. There are sometimes some of the most prominent and impactful places, the designers are chosen through design competition, and so it makes you kind of wonder, well, how, you know, you have designers in isolation, how when they're kind of confined, you know, almost kind of sequestered in their own, you know, studios and world, is that an inclusive process? Does that invite other voices? How can they be sure that they are doing this? The first thing you have to do is have a diverse team. It starts with your team. Diversity is not just about optics. It's the only way that you create design that's resonant, that's sustainable, culturally sustainable, that's relevant. And so that was one of the first things we did. We had African Americans, we had African, West African, we had, you know, white, we had you know, we had just the best of the best in the field coming together in a charrette, throw all the ideas that you have up on the wall. And what resonated for us were ideas of you know, from African American, just the Southern agrarian sensibilities, the views here, images of farming, West African art and architectural forms, you know, the sort of caryatid form that you see there on the right, and the corona crowning form on its head, notions of light and celebration. And finally, you know, we understood that this is, this really needs to respect the place that it's in. It needs to honor the Washington Mall, one of our key sort of national cultures or landscapes here. So I think all of you have seen the final design. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but what came out of that was a defining form, 3 irreducibles that we said, regardless, when we come out of this sort of sequestered design, we feel like things that need to be protected are this clear form of the building that represents a corona, which is a form in African American art and architecture, and African art and architecture, that represents, you know, strength, resilience, a crown. And in respect for the mall, we tilted those panels at the same angle as the capstone of the Washington Monument. in honor of our context and place. We also understood that regardless of how big this story is, it needs to be respectful of its place and its context. So when we were in our sort of sequestered design charrette and riffs, we had a lot more of the building above ground, but pushing that building below ground and allowing the land to form and flow around it was just to us, after collaborating, we didn't get there easily, right? Because as architects, we have egos, for some of you who don't know that, and some of them, sometimes they can be very strong. So we actually do need federal agencies like the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts and the National Capital Planning Commission to kind of push us. Those are good debates and good discussions. And so if you allow people to push and pull and have those healthy debates, you end up with the respect of the urban environment in a space that is more democratized, that is not overtaken by an egotistic structure. And we also know that it had to be welcoming. So it was not just the form of the building, the coronaform, it was the skin of the building. And from that, we drew really upon a lot of places in the South, eastern parts of the country. I've been there quite a bit. A lot of you have been to places like Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, and seen this wonderful grill work. A lot of this, that was an uncovered story, was done by African-American craftsmen and African craftsmen, some enslaved and some freed. So we brought that Southern African-American sensibility and just, sort of did our interpretation or interpolation or abstraction of how these panels can really become a significant part of the experience of that museum. And as you can see, once you kind of express that, they not only do a beautiful thing such as filtering light and daylight and shadows, they have a very practical, energy-conscious role here, but they also express that wonderful craftsmanship that has been lost these days, or a story that's not been told, in a color that resonates with African Americans. Along the mall, a lot of the buildings are neoclassical. They're, from westernized culture. They're white limestone. They're red clay tiled roofs. And this building stands in stark contrast to that, and the fact that the color of the building changes depending on natural light, moonlight, early morning lights, sunlight. So we love that because that also really reflects the different colors that African Americans come into. So that's important for people. That resonates. That's leaning into that notion of people being able to see themselves approaching or in this building. There was also another element on the southern side that we brought in I'm from the South, so a lot of these things come from the South. Many African Americans, and we'll hear, migrated from the South, but I actually was born in Texas and spent a good part of my childhood too in North Carolina. So the southern sensibilities, this notion of porch is huge in the South, and the fact that this building, the south side of this building it was an opportunity to bring in what we loved as kids about porch, and what I loved. I did so many things on the porch. I always say I was a great jack player, so I used to play jacks. I had my hair braided all the time on the porch. Shuck corn on the porch. Everything was done on the porch. So this notion of extracting and doing a very sort of extreme interpretation of porch on the south side was what we did. And it has this sort of uplifting knife form to welcome, as a gesture, welcoming gesture to everyone, that this is a place. Again, a departure from what you see on the mall, where you see these neoclassical palaces, I call them, often sitting up several rises of steps to get to them. Motown, happy to say, I love this project. I have been working on this project since 2015, and it went on a 2-year hiatus, and it's actually, we are actually starting construction next year. We actually prioritized an earlier phase, and now the expansion is starting construction next year. This is a fantastic project, and you know, for those of you that that know Detroit, everyone knows the hopefully I don't have to explain Motown to anyone in this room, but most of you know the Motown story. But the site is actually, you can see its relationship to downtown Detroit, but really its relationship to the historic Hitsville, USA, which is the house where Berry Gordy created, and his team. I would say Berry Gordy orchestrated so much of the wonderful music that still resonates with us today. My take on Motown, you know, just you know, living this for years, I feel like I've just been in a whole nother universe since 2015, meeting so many exceptional and wonderful people that were part of the story, from the icons that we know all the way down to Miss Lily, who made sure that the food in Hitsville, USA was cooked and served and kept the artists going. But bar none, I always say Motown exists because of these 4 elements, and this is the approach we made. One, Berry Gordy's family. The family structure is amazing, and when the museum opens, you'll get more detail in how we're honoring that, because Berry Gordy himself, who is also 91 years old, I had the opportunity to dance with him in his home in April of this year, so that was interesting for me, but it just an amazing man. But his story, he even says his story would never be this way. I got a note that said my computer's about to restart, so hopefully that doesn't do anything. I'm going to hit snooze, so just letting you know. He himself is clear that about his family. He's just such a gracious, you know, unassuming man, and the credit that the structure of his family gave him, it just resonated even more with me this year, after actually just having, you know, spent some time with him. Then there was Berry Gordy, we know the man himself. That's the second ingredient. Then the third ingredient was the city of Detroit, which was, you know, anybody can say whatever they want about the state Detroit has been and is coming out of today. But that was a city, one of the few cities of opportunities for escape of African Americans out of the harsh conditions of the South. So it was part of what we call the first, the second major migration, first major migration in the United States. And then there was Hitsville, USA, the house that Berry Gordy purchased because it had a garage, and that so much of that music was made in that detached garage that we call studio, or attached garage that we call Studio A. So in talking with so many Motown alumni and people, at first, I couldn't get past the music, but then you understand that it was really about the family. They considered themselves a family, and this is just kind of our interpretation of the things that came out. You know, we heard strongly, it was the love that was behind so much emotion that drove the music. So you have to understand that, otherwise you'll just get fixated on the music. So we also understood that this had to be about giving voice to Motown alumni, both in the foreground and the background. So this is another kind of major task and story to be able to tell. So how do you think about that in the architecture? In the end, regardless of what got there, we all came down, but in the end, it came down to the music, the hits. That's why it was called Hitsville. And the record, which was the physical expression of the hits, resonated to us. So you'll see the museum sits proudly behind Hitsville, USA, humbly, the expansion, not to upstage it. And we wanted it to really bring out this notion of gold and music and dynamicism. Motown wasn't static. And so you can see that the skin is alive. It has a beat. It has a rhythm to it that doesn't overpower. It still has the sophistication that Motown had, right? You come in one door as this crude 18-year-old kid. You come out the back door as a movie star. So that's important to us, to be able to tell that story and to bring in that iconic theater feel. So this is trying to say, you know, we got it. In the end, it's about the music. It's about the hits. It's about the unprecedented status that no one ever thought Motown would reach. Now, kind of moving here in the second portion of this, I want to talk about the urban context, the cultural landscape projects, because, you know, after, you know, working on so many buildings, it's the same sensibilities that apply to how we think about how we express buildings. Why does that have to be just, you know, the privilege of just buildings and vertical structure? What about the landscape? What about the context? So one of my early projects in sort of cultural landscapes is this one, and it's actually one of my favorites. It's a 1-acre site so we have folks here from North Carolina, so Greenville, North Carolina, where the city had years ago wiped out this entire area of site along the riverfront that was an African-American owned community, wonderful community, again, like the Charlotte, North Carolina community, very well educated. It was not an option. Everyone in that community, and they will tell you to this today, they went to church and they all went to college. You know, that was a rite of passage. There was no option. This was not discussed. That wasn't even a point of discussion. They're so proud of their community, but it was wiped out by the poor policy that we know of urban renewal. And why? I mean, redlining, which is usually a precursor to wiping out these communities, it didn't even precede that. The community was just wiped out. And in addition, there wasn't anything else, there wasn't a betterment put back there. It was just lost. So we facilitated a process of healing from what the community members that are still alive today, and they're survivors of what they felt was theft of their community. And so when it came to this little 1-acre site, the reason why that is important in this whole project was because that was where their church was. And this 1-acre site represents the memory. They could not move past the memories. Well, it's time to heal. Let's move past the memories and give something that's more commemorative. When the city wiped out their entire community that you see that previously existed, their homes, the images there, everything was just gone, and they were scattered and dispersed to God knows where. They did advocate to save the church, but the church later fell as a result of arson. So there was a lot of hurt and healing. So through the process of engagement, short story is that these 3 themes resonated: community, the pride that they have; spirituality, the music, the structure, the people that didn't even go to this community, not even African Americans, white, Hispanic, talked about standing or walking by that church on Sunday at around 11, 12 o'clock and hearing, just beautiful music emanating from it. And they missed the prominence. They felt that they had prominence in that community, and when that church was gone, that was gone. So again, simplifying our research, we realized that it was really important. There were 22 founders, mostly women, of this church. And so honoring them, also honoring these emotions and these experiences of gathering, of welcome, of reflectance was important. rejoicing was important. So our conceptualized version of the plan to memorialize the space is what you see on the screen. Somehow trying to, we never want to replicate, because that's actually dishonoring. You want to find a way to interpret it in something that's new and fresh. And so that's what we did. We brought back the prominence here. We brought back the spirit of stained glass, and the patterning in the stained glass actually represents the pattern of the plots of land that were lost and removed. Brought an interpretation, telling the stories, the imagings, the pictures. The sycamore trees were very, very important. This is called Sycamore Hill because of the church, but because of honoring the trees and the light that comes through it, and creating a central space that brings back that notion of where they used to worship and celebrate their memory. This project represents, it just opened. We just had the grand opening last month. And this is really what I feel. It's a bit, for me, a little bit of closure. This was Phil Freelon's last project. He died, obviously, before it opened. And so I stepped in to carry it across the mantle. So I felt wonderful when it opened. North Carolina, the state of North Carolina, wants to affirm the value of freedom for all North Carolinians. And right here in the heart of the legislative, Raleigh, North Carolina, is the capital of North Carolina, and right in the heart of the legislative center was a piece of land that had been overlooked. I mean, people walked by it for years and didn't see it. And the North Carolina Freedom Park Board had worked on this project for over 20 years, trying to get it realized. And so the state made a bold move to put this park in the heart of this legislative site, in plain sight, in the core of the Capitol. And so it's again, another 1+ acre parcel. And we imagine this as something that is a way to give voice to numerous of people of color who have been unrepresented groups in North Carolina that have played vital roles in the history. So when you go down, before this park, if you go down to Raleigh, North Carolina, some of you are from that, all you mostly saw were Confederate and war memorials. And that story, they proliferate across the southeastern part of our country. So the North Carolina Freedom Park provides a new vocabulary for commemorative projects. We wanted to speak positively into the public discourse around democratic values. We wanted people to experience this park not as victims or perpetrators or this or that, but just unearthing the stories of key individuals that have played a role. So this notion of cutting through the roots, the sort of metaphor that inspired Phil, because this is mostly his project at this time, was you see a big, beautiful tree, but then when you dig down and understand the root system that feeds the tree that you don't see, you really understand that the true life of that tree is in this root system. So it's about cutting through in a very non-orthogonal way, making a counterpoint to the way other memorials in the area are so geometrically organized. So our design dramatically changes this dynamic by creating paths through the park that facilitate connections to downtown. These paths are really cut deep, excavated into the site, because we wanted to reveal the tree root system, which in our minds are these unsung, unseen heroes. So the other thing that we did, in many of these projects, we collaborate with artists. Sometimes you'll see that, we as the architects flex our artistic skills. And so this beacon of freedom was something that we conceived of in our studio, and it's conceptualized around a flame that will never go out. That was a quote by Lyda Moore Merrick. We were just talking about North Carolina Mutual Life Insurance Company earlier today, which was the largest African-American-owned company in the country. Lyda Moore Merrick was the daughter of the first black physician and one of the owners in that entity. And she had a quote there about her father passing the flame to her that drove the inspiration for creating this park in this brush arbor. Many wonderful trees were saved as part of this. I think we were able to save 9 and only take out 2 trees in order to get this here. This was literally the raw photos of the opening last month that I threw in here this week because it was just such a beautiful opening. But what you can see is that these are folks engaging at various scales with the words, the text, the imagery. And in 2020, we actually shuffled, George Floyd was from North Carolina. And so all of the people here have roots in North Carolina. So we sort of shuffled and added his quote to this wall. And so people very emotional, very excited to see in plain daylight the state of North Carolina representing, these folks that we've all known about them. It's just never been daylighted. Couple more here. The Davidson College, we were talking about this earlier. We just started this. We won another design competition. Hank Willis Thomas is one of the leading black artists, African-American artists in the country. Most people know him. We collaborated with him on Davidson College's commemorative memorial to the enslaved and exploited people that they're opening. Just about most major institutions are wrestling with their relationship to exploited people, whether it was African American, slavery, otherwise. My own alma mater, UVA, wrestled with that and did a beautiful piece many years back. So this is a prominent Southern college. Davidson is a premier small college, and I just found out one of the alumni is Stephen Curry. So I got it right, only because I cheated. So they're trying to come to public terms with this history and involvement with slavery and forced labor, right in the heart. With Hank Willis Thomas, this involved engagement, but again, we were in a design competition, but what Davidson allowed us to do was engage with them while we were in competition mode. And so we met and talked, and Hank Willis Thomas met and talked, and we all thought about this notion of hands, and he had even memories from his own, his own experience of hands and what it means, whether it's giving, whether it's worshiping. And so the capacity to end generational rifts at this college is huge. The alumni there, when you talk to them, experience deep pain for people just completely dismissing, experiences and, obvious things didn't happen. This project also promotes a sincere commitment by the college of in this very central quad. You'll see these hands, and this is unearthing the hands, finally seeing the hands that help contribute and build this college. And you'll see inscribed the intent later on, some of the key people and statements that people can engage with. But it was really important to design a context where you can engage with the anatomy of the people. And this park also invites scaled immersion. So, you know, you can experience the hands coming up out of the earth, being uncovered at a distance or very up close. So that was important to us. But I think we're seeing more and more of these memorialized spaces, not necessarily in public space, but in public space at universities in some of their key locations. Two more. Destination Crenshaw, this project is just so massive that I'm going to go through it quickly, but it's important that you guys understand the impact of this project. This one, most of these projects for me, I am on for, you know, anywhere from 5 to 10 years. These projects are not quick burns. You know, so my career is not going to have 50 of these projects because it's a huge investment of time, emotion, and commitment. Destination Crenshaw, we've been working with them since 2017, and this is a project that brings everything that I think that you know, the Wilder School and public policy is about together. It is a community-inspired public art and streetscape design project that will represent and highlight the world-class contributions of Black Los Angeles. And so you have to keep in mind, Black Los Angeles is a culture that has been demonized, you know, gangs, you know, in the 80s and the 90s, that's all they're about, whose contributions have been appropriated worldwide, whether things that have been created in their own communities have been sold, and you know, you can go downtown, something that's created right there on Crenshaw, Slauson, sold in Hollywood Boulevard for more. So they don't realize the economic benefit of their own creation in past years. So enough of that. This project, because it's not just about the architects, and that's what's important here. So we're strategically using an iconic street name to anchor and provide context for public artwork and streetscape design. This is community inspired. So you could see this project for me more so than other was about checking your ego at the door, really stepping back, because I don't care. I can be Black, call me African American, call me female or not. Doesn't matter. You do not go into a community just because you have the same identity thinking you know everything. And this project was very, very deep engagement. It is, the genesis of it is the city decided to do a great metro line, obviously connecting everyone from LAX up to the Blue Line, great. But when they got to this area in Crenshaw, this 1.3 miles, every place else where they came into an area like that, they either dug below and run the metro below grade, or they elevated. In this community, they kept it on grade and cut the community right in half. So when we were contacted by this client, it actually took a while to figure out, wait a minute, this is the first time I didn't understand the client nor the project. I'm like, why are politicians hiring us? Don't they just debate each other? And why is this project, what is it, an outdoor museum? I'm a museum design, what is it? And then we understood that it was about healing. It was about trying to do something positive out of this poor decision to run this train at grade. So this is the context from 48th to 60th on Crenshaw Boulevard, and most people know the famous intersection of Crenshaw and Slauson. And you know, Nipsey Hussle's business was there and had a huge impact there. This is still ongoing, deep community engagement. It's a relationship with the community. It's trying to understand, you know, the sort of vastness of all of this. Out of all of this, we came up with three critical things that we could not compromise. It had to celebrate Crenshaw's heritage. It has to leverage their existing assets. It has to be a unique experience. So people, if this train's gonna come through here, they need to get off the train and they need to buy. and contribute some of this is an economic development project as much as anything, and it needs to catalyze growth. Crenshaw, in this population, is the largest intact African-American population west of the Mississippi that has been intact for generations and generations in terms of home ownership. So we had to pull together all of these things: architecture, art, the metro, interpretive design, landscape design. And so this, luckily, at the time I was reading Dr. Fullerlove's book, Root Shop, and really talking about the impact of, by the way, Dr. Fullerlove is a clinical psychiatrist, and she focuses on ways that social and environmental factors can impact the mental health of communities. So she talks about that, whereas we don't have overt things anymore, like, the extensive period of slavery and Jim Crow, we have things that are happening in more recent history in rapid succession that are still traumatic stress and still create trauma to communities, whether it's urban renewal, whether it's mass incarceration, gentrification. These things still are trauma. So that forced us to look back like, okay, let's understand how the African-American community got to this place in the first place. So understanding, of course, everybody knows the global slave migration from West Africa, most of the western parts of Africa, to the Americas. We get this. And then the two great migrations, domestic migrations from African Americans from the south to the north, and then ultimately from the south back out to the west. So we understood that over time, and this was our latest census at the time, was 2010. But you see the blue there. You see how that represents the African American community there, and you can see how it grew, and it was really extensive in the 1980s. But now you see in latter years how it's just kind of consolidated right around that Crenshaw line. So that is literally where our 1.3 is located. So that's pretty significant. The metaphor here, it took a long time to come up with this, like just constantly thinking about this. But the inspiration is the giant star grass of the African diaspora. And that grass was a great metaphor because it's native to the savanna, the western coast of Africa. But it was used as bedding hay on slave ships. And so hence, it was transported across the whole diaspora. And so in this country today, we call it Bermuda grass, and it's a rhizome grass. It's a grass that has more shallow roots, but they're very interconnected, and as most of you know who deal with rhizome, and they're hard to kill, right? So that metaphor, the giant star grass, became the unifying theme for our design. Small, strong roots, hard to destroy, survived in places where it should have died. That becoming the driving force also tied into this notion of encouraging this community. You're going to be tempted by economic forces to sell. Somebody comes in and offers you $100,000 above your asking price for your house. Yeah, that sounds pretty good, but where else are you going to buy in after you get that money? So encouraging a community to stay and grow where you're planted became the unifying theme. And so we organized the experience around these 4 nodes, experiential nodes, that allows us to organize parks, exhibit elements, art, and stories, improvisation. This community they're the masters of improvisation. They gave us everything, including the car culture, including the clothing culture, whether you wear your pants on your waist or below your hips, it doesn't matter. They gave us that. The first, the dreams, and mostly the togetherness, the resilience of community to come together. So we organized around this experience has pocket parks, murals, artists, pause here for a minute to say that this is the urban forest that, showing that clear-cut view. Most of the trees were wiped out by the city when they moved the Space Shuttle Endeavour to the California Science Center in Los Angeles in 2012. So when I was there in 2015, you stood down, and I never thought I would stand in an urban major center and not see a single tree. So it's about greening and reconnecting the neighborhoods, restoring those trees with the trees that are native to the area, but also an Afrocentric palette. So we're replacing 822 trees, 30,000 square feet of landscaping over this acreage. We have a connective tissue that is a system of shade trees and murals and structures and streetscape design. The paving pattern is that representative metaphor of that rhizomatic root system. It goes only from south to north, representing the migration of folks, or towards the west. And it ties the stories and the pop-up elements like the pavilions. The pavilions are metaphorically representing that rhizome grass, rising up, providing shade, but also speaking to, in spite of all the resiliency to thrive and to pop up for this community. There's storytelling and exhibits, and this is a collaboration with the community and community-based illustrators to represent historical figures in a quintessential Black LA aesthetic, to bring in a weaving or patterning that is uniquely Crenshaw, so that you have a branded environment that is created by the community. Whether it's the panels, the street panels that you see here, we're telling multiple stories, such as the Black Lives Matter story, Biddy Mason, the Soul Train stories, Sundays on Crenshaw. And we have over 100 2D and 3D opportunities, and we have 10 signature artists, and these are multi-million-dollar commissions, 10 commissions that will proliferate the boulevard. Mel Edwards, Allison Sarr, Artist Lane, and yes, Kehinde Wiley, who is, and he has an amazing, I can't wait for you guys to see this. It is fantastic. We've created a monument at the south end near the station, a landmark monument. And in thinking about creating this, the materiality, we wanted something that can mark the space that you can see from almost a plane. But we thought about how this community uses raw material to create the most fantastic things. So just cutting steel and bending raw steel to create something that's amazing. These are some of the pocket parks and some of the artists that will be featured. It's a representative of Allison Sarr's piece. And finally, this is under construction now. Sankofa Park opens in February. The whole genesis for this park was the image on the right when we were sitting in a community meeting. And all we did was say, I don't care, folks, bring anything that's meaningful to you and stand up and talk about it. It doesn't have anything to do with architecture design, just what is meaningful. And this woman brought in a Sankofa, and she held it up, and we took a picture, and she was talking about, everybody kind of knows what Sankofa is. It's that African symbol that means to go back and get what was taken. But she talked about specifically what it meant to her and her family. And I just said, that's it. We have to do something that brings the spirit of rising up as you move forward and looking back down this beautiful boulevard to remember, where you came from. So at this park, which is, the Togetherness Park, it's a celebratory moment, but also it's a moment to reflect down, hopefully, what will be a beautiful boulevard. So I have probably 5 minutes left, I think, or less. I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes, last 5 minutes, talking to you guys about another competition. So Jeff Bezos gave a sum of money to the Smithsonian institution. And at first I thought about this project, and I thought, wow, Smithsonian and Jeff Bezos are collaborating on a center to serve students in STEM education, underserved students, in a way that on the mall, centrally located on a mall, in a way that you know, nobody's done that before. You go down the mall, it's just a proliferation of museums and the like. So they're introducing a whole nother use on the mall. And so the programs will traditionally reach underserved students across the nation at the site of the new Bezos Learning Center, centered on air and space. The location is at the other end of the mall. So, you know, we won this through, and Smithsonian will tell you, what I'm sharing with you is our design competition, because we just started the design in June. But this is to say, and Smithsonian will tell you, we didn't select a designer, we didn't select a design, we select a design approach, a designer with a design approach. They're clear about that. So the design is going to take the same path as African American did. We're going to engage, now that we're out of, you know, sort of sequestered, and come up with some, you know, with a design that's beautiful, but the approach will remain the same. The approach, in my mind, we had to be absolutely, you know, uncompromising in making sure that underserved students really felt good about coming here. And we had to make sure that it was a place that felt accessible on the mall. Inspired by this notion of the spiral galaxy, of course, the galaxy that is home to our solar system is the Milky Way. You know, I thought about the gravitational pull of just pulling people in. This notion, the site is at the Air and Space Museum at the end of it. This notion of the origin of flight from air to space was an inspiration. And this notion of creating a bounded open space that can welcome people into a facility that they can actually begin to understand healing and education and learn outside of the confines of penetrating, you know, a wall or having a pass to get into a building. You can learn outside. Why not? Let's just pull it outside. So this notion of the courtyard, a spiral galaxy forming a courtyard, forming a large mass of the building, massing up around, you know, having three elements, whether it's a spiral courtyard, an observatory, and the building, all working together to create something that's unique and distinct but respectful in its place on the mall. It was an amazing opportunity for green space that the BLC can engage users with the overall mall experience, so we want to pull people off the mall very quickly. So I'll share with you sort of where we are, where we were at the competition. Then if I'm invited back, it opens in 2027. We'll see how finally designed. But these last images sort of express this genesis of skin of the BLC that expresses this sense of movement, a sense of a galaxy that's open to all people, that pulls people in off the mall, that takes in learning but disperses learning at the same time. And so this is the artistic rendering that was part of our competition entry. And then the final thing, the last 2 minutes here, is just an animation I want to share with you, not necessarily about the design, but just about the design thinking of how, hopefully when we're done with design, and I'm here talking to you, we have succeeded in pulling people in and making this a very different place on our national mall. Thank you. Thank you guys for your time. Really appreciate it.
Well, that was a fantastic lecture. Let's give her a hand again, please. Now we have about 20 minutes time for some questions and answers. There's some microphones that are going to be rotated around the seating area. If you'd like to ask a question, just please stand up from your chair and we will get a microphone to you. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
You spoke about community engagement and co-creation within the community. I'm curious, aside from just like inviting people and determining that, are there any other methods you're using to engage people beyond that to get community feedback for your projects?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for community engagement is to have community partners. So you can't really go into a community. We partner with, so there are always griots, there are always people that are leaders in the community, that know the community. We partner with them to get to know the community better, because otherwise, where would you start? How would you begin? And I think it's the responsibility is on the owners, the designers, and the community to come together and make sure we touch all parts of the community. We find ourselves, there's no like, one size fits all. You find yourself engaging, and then all of a sudden, we need to talk to this person, we need to talk to that person, we need to get in front of these people. So, yeah, it helps with partnership. Community partnership is important. Any other questions?
This is a design-specific question regarding National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC. The meditation space that's there, I feel like I heard Phil Freelon tell a story about why that is there and not as part of the museum experience.
Yes, absolutely, right. The question is about the contemplative space, and there's an oculus where the water flows. That's what you're talking about? We call it the contemplative court. When we were in programming, we designed the visitor experience. So oftentimes, like we did 2 years of programming on that project before we did, and when we designed the visitor experience and understood the gravity of the story, it became clear that people need a place to decompress. So the way you experience that museum is that you kind of come in, and if you want to do it in a way that most people do, you start with the deep history first. It actually spirals down below you, and then those wonderful history and community and culture galleries are above you, and the crown above your head. But we felt that coming out of that space, you needed a space to just kind of take it all in. Me working on that museum, even being African American my entire life and growing up in the South and having parents that experienced significant parts of the civil rights movement, I didn't know all these stories, and even me just creating, it's heavy. And so it's very important that people understand that although certain stories have to be told, people don't have to bear the weight of them themselves. And we felt like, so Smithsonian allowed us to program in at that time a space. It was an undetermined space. We just said, a space. We have no idea what we're going to do with it, but we need to plan for a space. And it ended up being this wonderful space that's an oculus, we call it. It penetrates the exterior landscape, and it has a water that streams on the inside with the quote of Martin Luther King behind it that talks about justice flowing like rivers and like a stream of mighty water. And the space just felt right, the location felt right for us, but that's what Phil was talking about.
Hi, amazing lecture. I'm so happy I can make it. 2 questions. One, was there a point or experience that you had in your life or overall career that was kind of the turning point for you, knowing that you wanted to do this kind of work? And then my other question is, do you have like a proudest, like I made it type moment, like this is what like I want to do with the rest of my life?
You know, that's a really good question. I've had that question before, and there's never been a light switch. I feel like my career has been a journey of discovery, which I'm glad it is, because I think the 20-year-old me wouldn't have wanted somebody to tell me. I'm glad I kind of just, found, this discovery is what I take it. And I think in my career, and I often tell people this, young students who I mentor in architecture, it took discipline for me to follow my passion, particularly given the time that I was entering my career where there weren't Black women in the profession. I think I told somebody earlier when I graduated from architecture school, there were only 80 registered African-American female architects in the country. And so, it wasn't so, and there were so many reasons, so many temptations not to stick with this. Largely, I saw people coming out of school making like twice the money I was making, and I'm like, what? I'm living in the architecture school, the A school all the time, and I see people like, able to chum it up a little bit. I'm like, what is the benefit of this? It's the passion. So I think just sticking with what you love and finding new meaning, because the profession as it was defined when I entered into it, architecture, I think you guys know, is historically a not only white male, but an elitist profession. It started off as something that rich aristocrats did in their spare time. They certainly was undignified to get paid for it. You just gifted your friend your great design, whoever you were. So, so it started off as that profession, and if you just kind of just think that you can impact and take the profession in a new way, and that you can bring new sensibilities and sensitivities to the profession, diverse voices, different ways of looking at design, I think that's the passion that drives me. To the question of was there a I made it moment, I'm kind of still waiting for that moment. I hope I never reach that moment. I don't intend to retire. I'm going to be one of those old people that people are trying to kick out of the studio because they're just a pain in the butt, like get out, retire, go somewhere. So, yeah, I've never reached a moment where I've said I've made it. I just feel like I just, love what I do. And I also think that that's a blessing as well.
My name's Angelina, and I just wanted to thank you so much for having this lecture. So I'm also interested in marketing, and after taking Mr. Smither's class, I'm interested in urban design. And I just wanted to ask, from one young Black woman to another Black woman, how did you get involved and get started into these projects? And where did you start in your professional career that really made you realize, okay, because I know you said that it's kind of a journey, but where in this journey did you start? And how did you make such a big impact in working on these big projects, such as the African American Museum?
Yeah. Where I started was just, there was nothing notable about that. You know, it's not like I didn't come out, you know, magna cum laude of, you know, Harvard Graduate School of Design, you know, I just started normal, like probably like 70% or 80% of people in my profession do. And when I started, you know, I thought, I know I'm in the right place. You know, a lot of that is driven too by, you know, just my personal faith and belief that when I know I've been put in the right place, I know I'm here even though it doesn't feel like, you know, it's like, shouldn't I be getting more money or, you know? So it just started average. But in the interim, I think in a career, and I tell young people this, you have to be willing to see the value in things that are easily overlooked. I remember the first time, we was talking about Pittsburgh earlier today with the Gulak family. I remember the first time I was working at a firm, and it was a mediocre firm. I say mediocre because it was an architecture and engineering firm, and I was lead designer of one of the studios of one of the architecture firms, but then I met this guy in Pittsburgh that owned his own company, and you know, and I didn't even know he was an architect. We met at kind of like a leadership Pittsburgh thing, and we were chatting. Then we realized that he's an architect, and so later on he was like, "Well, wouldn't you consider coming to work for me?" When I understood that coming to work for him, they were a really good design firm, and I felt like he would give me opportunity to do things, but I had to take a step back and pay, and I was already making, you know. And so sometimes it's realizing that it's okay to take a step back if it's going to get you 5 steps ahead. And that's exactly what happened, because that's the very first time I did my own cultural project. And what that project was, it was a transit project that I came in and in the main lobby, I said, we ought to be telling something more. This shouldn't just be a lobby. And so I say all that to say sometimes recognizing that opportunities are sometimes disguised not in the way that you expect them to, but they are the real thing. And I think you had a second question. I'm not sure if I answered it.
Yeah, you kind of answered.
I did. Okay.
Like, how do you feel that you really made an impact in the urban design space?
In the urban design space, I feel like I really made the impact. I remember the conversation I had with Phil when I said, we need to be doing more in public space. We need to do more impactful things. There are other projects here. There's that obviously I didn't share because we only had so much time with you guys today. But understanding that, and we were talking about this at lunch today, understanding that we as a profession, the architect, can no longer look at object buildings, hero buildings, buildings that, you know, stroke our ego and not understand the impact of what they do in space. So getting more cultural landscape projects, more memorialization projects, more of the projects that I showed you later, that was mostly driven by me. I actually said, let's hire an urban designer. And in 2017, we hired our first urban designer in our studio. And I've often said this, if I were to go back to get a degree, it'd probably be in urban design because of the intersections with that, with art, with public policy. The second, if I were to get a third degree, it'd be art, because I'm working with so many artists now, and I'm just understanding how art is a portal. It's an entry for many, many people in the community to participate in public space making and to engage in architecture. So art, working with artists has been huge too for me.
Hi, I was wondering how you envision cultural inclusion and net zero design being integrated into each other. Yeah,
net zero is not just something that's cutesy. I mean, in our profession, we all, several years ago, we had the great 2030 challenge, which was meant by the year 2030, all our new designs and our new buildings would be net zero. But they need to be more than net zero. They need to be contributing back. They need to be regenerative. They need to be depositing back to the grid. They need to be, and all of that, all of these things that, and this is my opinion, these issues such as sustainability, resiliency, diversity, equity, these are all things that have come into architecture practice as a result of the profession being more diverse. I can tell you right now, having more women in architecture have driven discussions about net zero, resiliency, health, education, welfare, all of the responsibilities that and levers that architecture can pull. So I would say net zero, and I'd say go beyond net zero, but net zero and equity and diversity are linked hand in hand, because oftentimes it's the people that are most diverse in the profession that are really at the forefront of these issues.
My name is Michael Weaver. I'm a grad student here at the Urban Planning Program. I wanted to gauge your knowledge of what do you feel about what's going on here in Richmond as far as the Remembrance Design. I know you don't have any, you didn't mention any Richmond projects in your brilliant presentation in your lecture, but I just want to see, if you have any opinions about anything of this nature going on in the city of Richmond. Thank you.
Yeah, of course we know Richmond has been the hotbed in 2020 for a lot of the, the controversy around statuary and, and the like. I wanted to work in Richmond, and if Bert were here from Baskerville, he'd tell you I've been lockstep with him trying to work on a project here. But I think, the memorials, these statues that were, defaced and subsequently torn down was done so. I think when I saw that, the good thing about that for me was, wow, I think I made a statement to somebody, we don't have to sit around when somebody's asking you, should architects be the leaders in this? If nobody steps up, people will step up and lead. So those efforts were done because, people stepped up, and now looking at the whole Monument Avenue, I'm not, intimately involved in those issues. I know some good people and designers and firms that are, so I can't really speak to that, but I will say when we were working heavily and almost with the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts and others, in a few years ago, and I had hoped to work on that project. Wasn't successful, but they ended up with a great firm, so I think all will be good there. But in terms of Monument Avenue and the monuments and all the discussions that have been going on, I'm not involved in those as intimately as I would like to be, I think, but I know that there are good people who are good design people who have the same kind of, proclivity and sensitivity towards these issues that I do.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hooray. So I'm pursuing a degree in urban planning, as I'm sure most of us are, but I have a minor in sociology, and I think that, especially with such a concentration of nonprofit organizations that are striving for equity in our infrastructure and things like that, it's really interesting, so I chose that. But in more of the lower level classes, we study a lot of Marx and his critics, and there's a big emphasis in his works of the process of estranging the laborer from their work and prioritizing the profitability of any given creation rather than the educational or use value. And I was wondering if you had ever felt that in your pieces, even if they did come to fruition, or if you'd seen artists that you've worked with suffer that fate, if that makes sense.
Both and. Yes. I would say yes. I mean, without naming specific, artist, but yes. I mean, I think there have been a couple projects where, and a current project, I would say, where we, sort of struggle with the value of what we're trying to do, and what the artist is trying to express. And I think this is the question you're asking, vis-a-vis the fear of not just the financial, put that aside, but the fear of how strong a stance, how strong, particularly in public space, because there is a sensitivity towards, once you do like what we said in Richmond, you take down memorials in public spaces that were clearly offensive, clearly represented one thing, but do you then pull the lever too strongly over to the other side? So it's always a balance. I think that's your question. I hope I'm answering it. There's always a balance in how far, the message. If we're saying we want to be an inclusive and diverse community and appeal to all of that, we don't want to alienate or have people feel too much like, victims or perpetrators, or alienate people. So is that your question specifically? Oh, the economic side, okay. I see. Where the budget takes priority over their artistic expression. That is currently happening. I can tell you this though, the philanthropic community is really robust, and even in times when the economy is depressed. So I don't feel like that should be an excuse. I think you can always find additional money. There's always somebody willing to give. So if an artist wants to lean in too strongly than a budget allows, I say if the onus is on the owner or the artist together to go get more funds for that. I'm seeing more and more philanthropy towards art than I've ever seen. I'm not sure what you guys are experiencing, but there should be no reason why a budget should truncate the artist's expression. The Davidson piece that I represented, we have a budget for that. With the constant escalation in costs that we've been ensuing, do we compromise, or what do? We have to work with someone, with the owner that's funding this, but to tell a more robust story, sometimes you need to tap into additional resources. And by the way, we did that on North Carolina Freedom Park with the Mellon Grant, secured an additional funding for the Mellon Grant, and that's what pushed that over the edge. So I say keep seeking the funding, yeah.
So now let's give a round of applause.